Hey, this is Mr. View, and this is your lecture on Germany and Adolf Hitler. Yesterday we started the Mussolini stuff with Italy and stuff about the hated Versailles Treaty and totalitarianism. Today we continue with Germany and Adolf Hitler, who you know a little bit about already, I'm sure. But Germany at this time was in big trouble. They hated the Treaty of Versailles. We talked about what it did. It screwed them over. They had to pay reparations. They had lost some land, they lost their colonies, they had to rebuild themselves and everybody else in Europe. So Germany was in a boatload of trouble at this time. Like I said, they lost lands, paid reparations, they limited their military as well. And because of this Treaty of Versailles, people started to blame the Jews for this treaty. Even though it wasn't really the Jews' fault, they blamed the Jews for the treaty. There were humongous problems in Germany. They had a huge depression. Our depression, it was twice as bad in Germany as it was in the United States. They had high inflation, which meant the cost of everything was rising. Germans were in such bad state depression-wise that their government decided to print a bunch of money. And you think, hey, people don't have money, let's just print a bunch. And that'll solve the problem. But it didn't solve the problem. What happened was, all the prices went up to match all the money that was floating around. It made the money useless. An item that cost 100 marks 1 year, a year later cost 944,000 marks. So think of it like, I don't know, a phone. A phone cost $100 1 year, the next year it costs nearly $1 million. That was the problem in Germany. The money was so worthless that some people picked it up and burned it as opposed to spending it. You'd have to take wheelbarrows full of cash to the grocery store in order to eat. So the money just wasn't worth anything. That screwed over Germany. The businesses, lands, farms, schools had been destroyed by World War I, but they didn't have the money to fix all those things. Because they at the same time had to fix France, and they had to fix England, and they had to fix all these other countries that they lost to in World War I because of those reparations. So Germany was in a very, very bad state. Their depression was way worse than the United States, which we call the Great Depression, right? So in walks this guy named Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born in Austria, not even born in Germany. But remember, Austria-Hungary and Germany were kind of really tight. He was turned down in art school as a young man. But he moved to Germany, and he fought in World War I on the German side. He did pretty well in war, nothing great, nothing bad. After the war, he joined the National Socialists, which stood for the Nazis. They're the Nazi party, and that's his political party throughout this whole process. In 1923, as a member of the Nazis, the beer hall putsch happened. And in this beer hall putsch, he basically goes to this beer hall, he stands on a table, he fires his gun, he goes boom, boom. He says, "The revolution has now begun." But it hadn't. There weren't enough Nazis. And so Hitler is thrown into jail. And during jail, he writes his book, Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf means my struggle. And it was basically his struggle for the National Socialist Party or the Nazi Party and how he was going to clean up Germany. He spouts about nationalism. And we all know that nationalism is pride in your country. The Germans must have pride in their country. It's all Aryan and it's all German. He also spouted a bunch of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, you learned, is prejudice against Jewish people. He basically says what he's going to do to the Jews when he gets out of jail. He also spouts imperialism, which we know is when a country dominates or takes over another country. He wants Germany to expand. It's survival of the fittest. It's that social Darwinism that we talked about. And finally, he says, I'm going to end the Treaty of Versailles. I'm going to rebuild the military. I'm not going to pay reparations anymore. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And when he gets out, that's what he does. So nobody should have been surprised at the things that Hitler did based on his book. But he's able to get away with it. Nazi membership grew as he was in jail and after he got out of jail, which was about a year later. He was made chancellor in 1933. The Nazi Party had grown so much and Hitler had grown so powerful and risen in the ranks of the Nazis to be the top guy that people were afraid of him, and the head honchos decided, well, let's keep him as chancellor, as our prime minister, if you will, and we can kind of keep him really close and we can control him that way. But they were wrong. From chancellor, he does a lot of things for Germany. He puts Nazis in key positions, and the Nazis basically take over the German government. He does end reparations. He stops paying these other countries these payments for war damages, and he starts funneling that money into a war machine for Germany. This puts a lot of people back to work. The men are back in factories. They're making tanks and machine guns and all these things for the war machine. The war is a great thing to get people out of a depression, or a country out of a depression. This creates a ton of jobs and basically ends unemployment. Their unemployment was way higher than the United States unemployment. I think it was at about 32%. He drops it down to 2%. 2%, which that's unheard of even today. So he does a great job of creating jobs. And because people have money, they're willing to overlook some of the crazy ideas that Hitler had. Hey, he might be crazy, but at least I have a job, or at least I have this, or at least I have this. So they were able to overlook some of that stuff that they didn't believe in, some of that anti-Semitic stuff, or where he was spouting some hatred. He absolutely rearms Germany, occupies some lands that he's not supposed to occupy against the Treaty of Versailles, but nobody calls him on it. The world does not want another war. And so the Frances and the Englands and the Italys and all these countries kind of look the other way as Hitler is rebuilding his army and doing things against the Treaty of Versailles that they had agreed to, and that the League of Nations kind of was powerless to do anything about because nobody wanted to fight. So here's Hitler rising up, and he's slowly gaining that power in Germany. He takes a totalitarian attitude, so he rigs elections. He controls people through propaganda, especially in his fiery speeches. He also starts to brainwash the kids with the Hitler Youth. He has henchmen called brown shirts that go around kind of taking care of his business, terrorizing people and beating people up if they need to. So he does a lot of the totalitarian things that we learned about in class yesterday. So that's it. Please get started with your Weebly assignments and tear it up, and I will see you on Friday.